We will be reading chapter 17, How to Share Your Faith. Perhaps you haven't been sharing your faith as you know you should, and you are wondering how to get started. At the same time, you have a very real fear of approaching strangers and talking about the things of God. Besides, if you do approach someone, you don't want to blow it. These thoughts combine into one big, cold, ever-increasing snowball. Strangers are hard enough to approach. What do you say to someone you don't know? How about your neighbors? They are even harder to approach, if that's possible. If you make a mess of witnessing to your neighbors, you don't want to start a lifetime feud. Then there's your mother-in-law. Upsetting her could cause really big problems. These are fears that all of us have, and they are very real. However, there are certain principles that can help us to at least bring out fears into perspective. Think of what you fear, and then think of the terrible fate of those who die in their sins. Which is worse? Remember, when it comes to evangelism, you have a similar responsibility to that of a firefighter. Think of his moral obligation as he looks at the mother screaming for help from a 6-story building. You must deal with your fears in light of the sinner's terrible fate. Here are some simple suggestions for getting started. Be friendly. Talk with people. Practice at the park, at the gas station, or at the grocery store. Perhaps you already have an outgoing and friendly personality, but if you tend to be shy and introverted, try to open up a little and start talking with people. A simple "Hi, how are you?" isn't hard. Nice day, isn't it? My name is so-and-so. With a bit of practice, anyone can learn to be friendly. Most people respond warmly to warmth. Once we see that this is true, it will help to calm our fear-filled imaginations. Keep going back to the firefighter. Think of a firefighter who is shy. He comes to you and complains that he doesn't have an outgoing personality. He's not too keen on climbing ladders. He's not very strong. He would rather listen to music and read books than rescue dying people. So what are you going to tell him? You are going to let him know that if he is professing to be a firefighter, he has to better deal with his fears, build up his muscles, and get his priorities straight. Otherwise, he shouldn't deceive himself into thinking that he is a firefighter. One of our webmasters, who was shy by nature, told us about how he and a friend once went to the park on a Saturday afternoon just to practice being friendly to strangers. They had so much fun that they couldn't wait to get out the next weekend to take the next step. After you have gained a measure of confidence in simply being friendly and talking to people, you are ready to learn the next step: how to swing the conversation to the subject of spiritual things. Don't open with grace. It may be a relief to know that you shouldn't walk up to someone and begin a conversation by talking about Jesus. They'll most likely think you're strange. Bright light in the eyes is always offensive. Instead, start in the natural realm, talking about everyday things, and then swing the conversation towards the spiritual realm, talking about spiritual things. That's what Jesus did in John 4:7-26. When he met the woman at the well, he began by talking about natural things, a drink of water. He then swung the conversation to spiritual things, living water. You may start off talking about football or the weather, and then perhaps use something in the news to swing into the subject of spiritual things. Or you might simply ask if the person knows of a good church in the area. Perhaps you can use a gospel tract. That's what I do almost every time. Just say, "Hi, where are you from?" "I'm from such and such," etc. When you muster up the courage to say, "Did you get one of these?" It's a gospel tract. Have you had a Christian background? Another good question is, what do you think happens after people die? Where do they go to? You haven't mentioned God, sin, judgment day, or hell. You are just asking what they think, so you won't feel uncomfortable. Most people are pleased to give their opinions anyways. It doesn't matter how you do it, only that you do it. Again, start in the natural realm so they don't think that you're a religious nut, and then make the transition any way you want. that will lead you directly into a conversation about the things of God. Remember, most people are not offended when the subject of God comes up, despite what our overripe, fear-filled imagination tells us. WDJD, the 4 stepping stones. If you can remember 4 stepping stones, you can confidently lead any witnessing encounter, and you will be in control of every conversation you have about your faith. Imagine you will know exactly where you are, and you will know exactly where the conversation is going. You don't have to study Greek, you don't have to understand archaeology. Just remember 4 points and you can begin to say goodbye to most of your fears about evangelism. There is no doubt that most difficult thing to do is to bring up the things of God. The next hurdle isn't quite so high. It naturally issues out of asking someone about spiritual things. The stepping stones are represented by 4 letters, WDJD, which stands for What Did Jesus Do? Remember the question and the acronym to help you to remember the 4 stepping stones. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? You will be surprised to find that people are not offended by you asking if they consider themselves good people. If they say no, which is highly unlikely, ask them what they mean. Remember, you are asking them about their favorite subject themselves. Most likely, you'll find that they are kidding, or what they've done, something in their life that they feel bad about. Otherwise, expect almost everyone to say, I'm a pretty good person, or I'm a really good person. Proverbs 26. This reveals their proud self-righteousness. Now you are ready to use the law to humble them, the same way Jesus did. See Mark 10:17-22. Do you think you have kept the 10 Commandments? Some will say yes, others will say that they haven't. Either way, you simply continue by saying, may I ask you a few questions to see if that's so? They will almost always say that you can, because they know that they are a good person, so they don't feel at all threatened. You may want to start with the 9th commandment. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, because most people will readily admit to having lied, at least once. Next, you may want to ask about stealing, then adultery, lust, then taking the Lord's name in vain. Here is how to go through each one in order that I typically use. The 9th commandment. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. After you've said, may I ask you a few questions to see if that's so, simply say, have you ever told a lie? Some will admit to lying, others will say they have told only white lies, and a few will claim they have never told even one lie. So, if so, gently press the issue. Do you mean to say that you have never told anyone a lie, even once? Usually they will say something like, maybe when I was a kid. Ask, what does that make you? They will hesitate to say it, but get them to admit it. A liar. If they refuse to say a liar, ask what would you call me if I told a lie? It may surprise you to know that people don't get angry at this approach. Instead, they become sober. They may try to sidetrack you by saying, I don't believe in the Bible. Simply continue on your course. If they argue about the Bible, say, I know you don't believe in it. I am simply sharing with you what the Bible says. Okay, let's continue. The 8th commandment. You shall not steal. Have you ever stolen anything? Many will claim that they haven't. Have you ever taken anything that did not belong to you, regardless of its value? Anything? Even when you were younger? Be honest before God. Some will try to trivialize theft by saying that they stole when they were children. Ask, what does that make you? And gently press them to say, a thief. The 7th commandment. You shall not commit adultery. Have you ever committed adultery? Again, most will say no. Then add, Jesus said, whosoever looks upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. Have you ever looked at someone with lust? The 3rd commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Have you ever taken the Lord's name in vain? Most will admit to this one. Then gently explain. So, instead of using a four-letter filth word to express disgust, you have taken the name of the one who gave you life and everything that is precious to you and used it to express disgust. That is called blasphemy. And God promises that he will not hold anyone blameless who takes his name in vain. At this point, you should be noticing something. The individual will either grow quiet, shut up under the law, see Romans 3:19, or will be getting agitated. If the person seems to recognize his guilt, you may want to say at this point, by your own admission, you are a lying thief, a blasphemer, an adulterer at heart, and we've only looked at 4 of the 10 commandments. If he is still trying to defend himself, I'm not a bad person. Go through a few more commandments. The 6th commandment, you shall not murder. Have you ever murdered anyone? Most will say that they haven't. Simply point out that Jesus said that if you merely call your brother a fool, you are in danger of the judgment. And the Bible says if you ever hated anyone, you are a murderer in God's eyes. God does not simply judge actions. He knows the intentions of the heart. The 1st commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Have you always put God first in your life? Most will admit that they haven't. God should be first in our lives. We are commanded to love him with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. In fact, Jesus said that our love for God should be so great that our love for our parents, kids, friends, even our own lives should seem like hatred by comparison. The 2nd commandment, you shall not make for yourself an idol. Have you ever made an idol, a god, to suit yourself? People will usually say that they haven't. Have you pursued money more than God? Then you have made money an idol. Have you given work more attention than God? Then work is an idol. If you have ever thought God is loving and wouldn't send me to hell, you are right. Your God wouldn't send anyone to hell because your God doesn't exist. He is a figment of your imagination. You created a God in your own mind that you're more comfortable with, and that is called idolatry. It's the oldest sin in the book, and God warns us that idolaters will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. The 4th commandment, remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Have you kept the Sabbath day? God requires 1 day out of 7 for you to rest and acknowledge him. How many times have you neglected to bow your head before your meal and thank him for your food he has provided? How many thousands of times do you think you've just greedily dug in without thanking your provider? The 5th commandment, honor your father and your mother. Have you always honored your parents, treating them in a way that is pleasing to God? The 10th commandment, you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Have you ever coveted or jealously desired something that did not belong to you? Covetousness reveals a lack of gratitude for what God has already given you. And we'll stop there and keep going tomorrow. Thank you for listening. God bless you.